Hello, Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes here. Only a month left in the UCP leadership race, and I want to share some thoughts on an issue that has had little attention from all the candidates. I'm talking about rural crime. I'm talking about ending our ridiculous system of catch and release. In recent years, increasingly brazen thieves and crooks have continued to target farms and rural communities right across Alberta. The vast majority of property crimes committed in Alberta do not result in convictions, time served, or let alone charges. This has led professional criminals to believe that crime does, in fact, pay. Meanwhile, homeowners and farmers who dare to defend themselves and their families often find themselves on the wrong side of criminal charges and expensive restoration. Just ask Eddie Maurice. I've had enough, and I know rural Albertans feel the same way. It's time our justice system started targeting criminals, not victims. It is time our judicial system ended our catch and release system. Let's start with the restitution reform. I would like to see the government of Alberta begin advocating for federal institution reform. Under Canadian law, every victim has a right to request restitution. However, the onus is on the victims of crime to request restitution. Under my mandatory restitution proposal, property crime cases where the victim does not request restitution, the perpetrator would still be required to pay a restitution fee. The penalty would be provided to be a provincial fund set up to support victims assistance organizations. In addition, under the current law, victims of crime can seek restitution from young offenders. However, judges may order such restitution be paid in the form of community service. Under my reform, the choice will be belonging to the victim rather than an appointed judge. Secondly, a castle doctrine. First, we need to start pushing for legal changes to recognize every Albertan's right to self-defense. While the criminal code is a matter of federal jurisdiction, Alberta's government should start advocating for the introduction of a castle doctrine. Have you ever heard the phrase, an individual's home is their castle? A castle law, therefore, would be used to insulate occupants from some criminal charges where defending themselves and their families. Our way to advance this issue provincially would be for the government of Alberta to approve a motion recognizing every Albertan's right to defend themselves and their families. But if Alberta is going to be serious about leading on this issue, we need real action. The purpose is to send a clear message when it comes to self-defense, protecting our families, where our society stands, and it stands on the side of Alberta homeowners and not criminal trespassers. Next, we need to strengthen property rights. I believe it is time for Alberta to formally recognize property rights within a written constitution for our province. Enacted in 1972, the Alberta Bill of Rights enshrines the right of the individual to liberty, security of the person, and enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof except by due process of the law. However, the Alberta Bill of Rights has limited scope and it can be overridden by the legislature. Bureaucrats, politicians running our province may like it that way, but everyday Albertans know better. It is time to take the next step towards making property rights enshrined in Alberta. In addition, it's time for the UCP to make good a promise from the 2019 campaign. The UCP promised a referendum on adding property rights to the Canadian Constitution, with Premier Kenney promising the referendum would be held in 2021. Of course, no such referendum was ever held. Promise made, promise broken. Albertans deserve better. Trespassing. It's time for Alberta to get tougher on trespassers. As you may have seen in the media, federal environmental officers were recently believed caught trespassing on Saskatchewan farms, attempting to take water samples without seeking permission from the rightful property owners. In response, the government of Saskatchewan quickly fixed the trespassing law to specifically include federal crown employees. This is something Alberta should do as well. And while we're at it, it's time to put tougher minimum fines and penalties in place for those convicted of trespassing in Alberta. Responsible gun owners. In addition to these major changes, I believe Alberta has a role to play in standing up for responsible firearms owners. The Trudeau government is again going out of its way to portray the owners of legally purchased firearms across Canada as a danger to our society. Nothing could be further from the truth. The use of firearms in violent crimes in Canada is much less prevalent than in the United States, and there is a good reason for this. Currently, in order to legally purchase firearms in Canada, an individual is subject to background checks and is required to take part in training courses. And rather than continually increasing the cost to take part in such training, government should be encouraging, promoting, and celebrating our responsible gun ownership. To this end, I believe it is time for the government of Alberta to provide tax incentives to help defray the cost of federally required gun club membership and firearms training courses. These are just a few of my ideas for shaking up our justice system to better protect the victims of crime. Let me know what you think, and if you have additional ideas and thoughts, please let me know. I would also like to encourage you to reach out to all the UCP leadership candidates. Do they have a plan? A plan to crack down on the growing crime and criminal behavior? Do they have a plan to protect victims? If so, what are the details? And if not, why not? The silence we've been getting from the leadership campaign on this important issue just isn't good enough. Thank you. Thanks for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon.